Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The opulent silence of the Spencer Publications penthouse, a testament to modern Los Angeles wealth with its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the smog-hazed panorama of the city, was broken only by the soft, rhythmic clicking of Bill Spencer's keyboard. For Bill, this was a form of meditation, the orchestration of corporate dominance his preferred state of being. Across the vast, minimalist living area, his son, Will Spencer, was engrossed in his own digital world, his thumbs flying across his phone's screen with the practiced dexterity of his generation. He was deep in a group chat with his cousins, Douglas and Kelly, planning a weekend trip to Malibu that involved more debate about surfboard brands and sushi restaurants than any of them would ever admit to their parents. The scene was one of placid, almost sterile, domestic tranquility, a carefully constructed peace that had settled over the Spencer family after years of relentless drama, betrayals, and near-fatal confrontations. It was a peace that, like most things in Los Angeles, was beautiful on the surface and terrifyingly fragile beneath. Will, now a young man with his father's sharp jawline and his mother's thoughtful eyes, had grown accustomed to this new normalcy, a life where the biggest threats were a dip in stock prices or a negative social media post, not a hidden enemy or a long-lost relative returning from the dead to claim a throne. His phone, a sleek black slab of glass and metal, was his portal to this manageable world, a world of memes, messages, and manageable conflicts. So, when the device vibrated with a unique, sharp trill that signaled an incoming text from an unknown number, he felt only a flicker of minor annoyance, likely a wrong number or a spammer from some offshore betting site. He didn't even look up from his conversation with Douglas, his thumb swiping lazily to dismiss the notification. But the preview text, stark and white against the dark mode background of his messaging app, froze the very blood in his veins. It was only 3 words. 3 words that carried the weight of 1,000 ghosts. 3 words that shattered the penthouse's serene silence into a million screaming fragments. I'm still alive. The phone felt suddenly alien in his hand, a cold, heavy stone. The casual, easy slouch of his posture snapped into rigid, painful straightness. All the ambient sounds of the penthouse, the hum of the central air conditioning, the distant whir of a blender from the kitchen, the relentless, metronomic click of his father's keyboard, seemed to amplify, then distort, as if he were hearing them from the bottom of a deep, dark well. His heart, which had been beating a calm, steady rhythm, now hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird desperate for escape. His breath hitched in his throat, a sharp, audible gasp that finally caused Bill to look up from his computer screen. His famous Spencer intuition immediately peaked. Will? Everything all right, son? You look like you've seen a ghost. The irony of the cliché was so profound, so brutally precise, that Will felt a hysterical bubble of laughter try to escape his constricted throat. He swallowed it down, a bitter, coppery taste filling his mouth. A ghost. That's exactly what it was. But whose ghost? His mind, reeling and chaotic, became a frantic slideshow of the departed, the supposedly deceased, who populated the dark and tangled forest of his family tree. The Spencers and the Forresters were not like other families. Their history was written not just in love and ambition, but in blood, betrayal, and mysterious disappearances. His first, most visceral thought was of his own mother, the brilliant, troubled Dr. Taylor Hayes. How many times had they believed her dead? A plane crash in the remote, unforgiving mountains of Morocco, a crash that had left them mourning for years, only for her to return, a miracle wrapped in trauma and lost memories. But Taylor was here, in Los Angeles, alive and well, her practice thriving, her presence a constant, reassuring reality. It couldn't be her. The text was a declaration, a triumphant, almost taunting announcement from beyond an assumed grave. His mind then raced to his grandfather, the formidable, ruthless Massimo Morone. But no, Massimo's death, while shrouded in the usual corporate secrecy, had been accepted, his legacy absorbed into the Spencer empire. Then, the more sinister possibilities began to unspool. Stephanie Forrester? Her passing had been a monumental, genuine event, the end of an era, her presence still felt in the very foundations of Forrester Creations. It felt sacrilegious to even consider it was her. But what about others? The name Amber Moore flashed in his mind, a figure from a past so distant it felt like ancient history, but he knew the stories, the chaos she had wrought. Or perhaps it was Sheila Carter? The name alone was a curse in his household, a specter of pure, unadulterated evil that his father and his stepmother, Brooke, still whispered about with a mixture of fury and fear. But Sheila was gone, wasn't she? Her reign of terror had supposedly ended in a final, definitive confrontation. The news reports, the police assurances, but with Sheila, could one ever be truly sure? Death seemed to have a slippery grip on her, a tendency to loosen its hold at the most inopportune moments. Will? Damn it, son, answer me. Bill's voice was sharper now, laced with a paternal concern that quickly morphed into executive command. He rose from his desk, his imposing frame casting a long shadow across the polished concrete floor. He moved towards his son, his eyes, the same piercing blue as Will's, narrowed in assessment. Will could only mutely extend the phone, his hand trembling so violently the device seemed to dance in the air. Bill took it, his brow furrowed in impatience, but as his eyes scanned the screen, that impatience evaporated, replaced by a slow, dawning horror that washed the color from his tanned, confident face. His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek, a telltale sign of a storm brewing within. What in God's name? He breathed, the words barely audible. He snatched the phone more firmly, his thumb jabbing at the screen to bring up the details of the number. It was a Los Angeles area code, but the sequence was utterly unfamiliar, a prepaid burner phone, the weapon of choice for anonymous threats and clandestine affairs. Bill's mind, a supercomputer of corporate strategy and personal vendettas, immediately began running scenarios, his thoughts a dark mirror of his son's. But his list was longer, more populated with vengeful ghosts. He thought of his own brother, Jack, but that was a rivalry of business, not life and death. He thought of old enemies from his takeover days, men he had ruined financially, but this message felt personal. Deeply, intimately personal. And then, a name surfaced from the deepest, most carefully sealed vault of Bill Spencer's memory. A name he had not spoken aloud in over a decade. A name associated with a chapter of his life so reckless, so shrouded in a haze of bourbon, fast cars, and faster women, that he had willed himself to forget it. A summer in Monte Carlo, a whirlwind affair with a woman of intoxicating beauty and dangerous mystery. Her name was, but no, it couldn't be. There had been an accident. A fiery, high-speed crash on a coastal road, the car tumbling down a cliff into the churning, unforgiving Mediterranean. The reports were conclusive. The wreckage was found. The body was never recovered in any identifiable state. The official conclusion was death. He had accepted it, mourned in his own shallow, Spencer way, and moved on, adding it to the long list of casualties in the wake of his own ambition and appetite. But the text. I'm still alive. It was the kind of dramatic, cinematic pronouncement she would have loved. She had always craved drama, thrived on the edge of catastrophe. His blood ran cold. Could it be? After all these years? And if it was her, why contact Will? Why not contact him directly? The answer was as obvious as it was terrifying, to get to him. To strike at the heart of the Spencer patriarch through his most vulnerable point, his son, his heir, the one person for whom Bill's love was genuine and uncalculated. Dad? Will's voice was small, stripped of its usual confident timbre, the voice of the little boy who used to crawl into his parents' bed after a nightmare. Who is it? What does this mean? Bill forced his own panic down, locking it away in the iron vault of his composure. He was Bill Spencer. He did not get rattled. He dealt with problems. He crushed them. He handed the phone back to Will, his movements deliberately slow and controlled. It's nothing, he said, the lie so transparent it was almost insulting. Some sick prank. A troll. I'll have my IT security team trace the number and put an end to it. But his eyes, those windows to a soul usually shuttered and barred, betrayed him. They held a flicker of something Will had rarely seen in his father, genuine, unadulterated fear. A prank? Will repeated, his voice gaining a shred of its former strength, fueled by disbelief. Who pranks someone by pretending to be a dead person? This isn't a meme, Dad. This is deranged. He looked down at the phone again, the 3 words burning into his retina. I'm still alive. He had the sudden, overwhelming urge to throw the device against the wall, to shatter it into 1,000 pieces, as if by destroying the messenger he could destroy the message itself. Before Bill could formulate another placating, paternal lie, Will's thumb, acting on a desperate, instinctual need for answers, hovered over the text field. He typed a single, shaky-worded reply, "Who is this?" He hit send before his father could stop him. The message seemed to hang in the digital ether for an eternity, the delivered status a taunt. Bill watched, a silent curse on his lips. He knew engaging was a mistake. It showed weakness, curiosity, fear. It gave the sender power. But it was too late. For 3 agonizing minutes, they stood there in the sun-drenched penthouse, 2 powerful men rendered helpless by a few pixels on a screen. The world outside continued, cars inching along the freeways, lives being lived, but inside, time had stopped. Then, the phone vibrated again. A single, soft buzz that echoed like a thunderclap in the tense silence. Both their eyes snapped to the screen. A new bubble appeared. Not a name. Not an explanation. But another message, even more chilling in its specificity. You don't remember your own mother? Will recoiled as if struck. My mother? But Taylor is. He looked at his father, his confusion absolute. This is insane. Mom is downstairs in her office. I just texted her an hour ago. But Bill's reaction was entirely different. The color drained from his face completely, leaving a ghastly, ashen pallor. The name he had been trying to suppress now screamed in his mind. It was her. The woman from Monte Carlo. The one he had never told anyone about, least of all his son. The one who, for a few passionate, reckless weeks, had believed his promises and, in the aftermath of the accident, he had assumed had taken those promises to a watery grave. But if she was alive, and if she was claiming to be Will's mother, the implications were catastrophic. It would mean that Taylor was not Will's biological mother. It would mean that his entire life, his entire identity, was a carefully constructed lie. It would be the ultimate Spencer scandal, a bomb that could destroy his relationship with his son, with Taylor, with Brooke, with everyone. This wasn't just a ghost from the past, it was a nuclear warhead aimed directly at the heart of his legacy. Dad? Will's voice was now laced with a new kind of terror, the terror of ontological uncertainty. What is she talking about? What does she mean, my own mother? Taylor is my mother. Bill placed a hand on his son's shoulder, the gesture meant to be reassuring but feeling like the grip of a desperate man. Will, listen to me. This is not a conversation to have here. This is not something to be discussed over text messages from a stranger. This is a malicious, targeted attack. Someone is trying to hurt us. To hurt me, by hurting you. He was using his most persuasive, boardroom voice, the one that could convince shareholders to approve a hostile takeover. We need to be smart about this. We need to get security involved. We need to find out who is behind this number before we jump to any crazy conclusions. But Will was no longer a child to be placated. He was a Spencer, and the Spencer blood carried a potent mix of arrogance and a desperate need for the truth, no matter how ugly. No, he said, pulling his shoulder away. No more evasions, Dad. You looked like you'd seen a ghost before that second text. You know something. Who is this? Who is she claiming to be? His eyes, wide and pleading, searched his father's face for any flicker of honesty. If this is a lie, tell me it's a lie. Look me in the eye and tell me that Taylor Hayes is my biological mother. Bill Spencer, the man who had stared down corporate titans and political power brokers without flinching, found he could not meet his son's gaze. He looked away, towards the panoramic window, his mind racing through the consequences of every possible answer. To confirm it was to unleash hell. To deny it, if it was true, would be a lie that would eventually be exposed, causing even more damage. His silence was more deafening, more damning, than any confession could have been. Will's heart sank into the pit of his stomach. The absence of a firm, immediate denial was an answer in itself. The foundation of his world, the very bedrock of his identity, developed in the warm, loving presence of Taylor Hayes, began to crack and crumble. The woman who had read him bedtime stories, who had healed his scraped knees, who had taught him about compassion and strength, was she not his mother? The thought was too monstrous, too vast to comprehend. He stumbled back, collapsing into a sleek, uncomfortable modernist chair, the phone slipping from his nerveless fingers and clattering onto the floor. The screen, now spiderwebbed with cracks from the impact, still displayed the two devastating messages, "I'm still alive" and "You don't remember your own mother?" The cracks in the glass seemed to mirror the fractures now spreading through his soul. Bill finally turned, his expression a mask of grim resolve. The crisis was here. The threat was identified. His paternal instincts, often buried beneath layers of narcissism and ambition, surged to the forefront. This was no longer about corporate espionage or a jealous rival. This was about protecting his son from a truth that could break him. "Will," he began, his voice low and intense. "There are things about my past, things I am not proud of. Things I thought were buried forever. This person, if it is who I think it is, represents a very dark time. A time before Taylor. A time I never wanted you to know about." He knelt before his son, a rare gesture of vulnerability. "You have to believe me when I tell you that Taylor is your mother in every way that truly matters. She raised you. She loves you. That is your reality. This is just a ghost trying to haunt us." But his words, meant to comfort, only confirmed Will's worst fears. There was another woman. There was a secret. The text was real. The ghost was real. What was her name? Will whispered, his eyes fixed on the cracked phone on the floor. What was her name? Before Bill could formulate another evasion, his own phone rang, the shrill tone cutting through the tension. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening further. It was Brooke. Of course. The universe, it seemed, was determined to escalate this crisis to a full-blown catastrophe. He had to answer. "Don't say a word about this to anyone," he commanded Will, his voice returning to its usual authoritarian tone. "Not to Brooke, not to your mother, not to anyone. Do you understand me? This stays between us until I can get a handle on it." He stood up, turning his back on his shattered son, and answered the phone. "Brooke. What is it?" His voice was strained, a poor imitation of its usual confident boom. On the other end, Brooke's voice was laced with a different kind of concern. "Bill, are you all right? You sound strange. I was just calling to see if you and Will wanted to come over for dinner. Ridge is grilling, and it would be nice to have a family evening." A family evening. The phrase was a cruel joke. Bill closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Not tonight, Brooke. Something has come up. A business emergency. I have to deal with it." He could feel Will's accusatory stare burning into his back. He ended the call as quickly as he could without arousing more of Brooke's infamous intuition. When he turned back, Will was still sitting in the chair, but his posture had changed. The initial shock was receding, replaced by a simmering, cold anger. He looked older, the last vestiges of his youthful innocence stripped away in the span of 10 minutes. "I want to know everything," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "I'm not a child you can shield from the ugly truths of your life. This is my life, too. My identity. You will tell me who she is, and you will tell me now." The dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably. The son was now demanding answers from the father, and the father's power, built on a foundation of secrets and lies, was crumbling. Bill knew he was cornered. The ghost had not only announced she was alive, she had, with 2 text messages, successfully turned his son against him. The battle lines were drawn not in a boardroom or a courtroom, but in the heart of his own family. The war for the truth, for Will's very soul, had just begun, and the first shot had been fired from a burner phone somewhere in the sprawling, anonymous labyrinth of Los Angeles. The message was received, and its aftershocks would ripple through Forrester Creations, through Spencer Publications, through every relationship and every carefully maintained facade, until the truth, in all its ugly, undeniable glory, was finally dragged, kicking and screaming, into the light. The ghost was alive, and she was coming home.